Merry Christmas. Thank you, Natalia, for reading that wonderful Christmas proclamation, one of the oldest documents in Christianity that talk about the meaning of the birth of Jesus. And I love it because it sets it in a particular time in history, a particular place in history. And though this story is universal, it is also particular. And in its particularity, we find our own story as well. Luke opens also with this kind of particularity in the gospel that was read for us. In those days, a decree went out from the Emperor Augustus that all should be registered. This was the first registration taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. This may sound like so much Bible talk, but actually it tells us something very important about what's here in this text for us. God finds us exactly where we are in human history, to be revealed as the Word made flesh and to communicate a message that never gets old. There's always a place for you. It could begin in this way. In the year when Barack Obama was president and Wendy Davis was governor, and, sorry. Just having a prophecy moment. When equal marriage was celebrated in California, Connecticut, Iowa, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, Utah, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine, Maryland, Washington, and Washington, D.C., God sent a message to the Cathedral of Hope saying, what you stand for is still important. People are going to find out about my very important message through you, my very important particular message that no one is ever out of place. This Bible story about the birth of Jesus has in each section something I want to lift out from it because I think it speaks to us and reminds us that the meaning of Christmas is that there is always a place for you. You can't be out of place. It tells us that Mary and Joseph had to move around because governments were toying with workers and wanted to find out how to maximize the profit that they could realize from locating them in a particular place. So they moved them all around. And we can't tell this story on Christmas Eve amidst all this beauty and not remember that when we talk about Mary and Joseph being moved around, perhaps without documents, 40,000 people were deported this month from our country because of our immigration policy, and that 30,000 is the quota that's been set by Congress, and that quota is being fulfilled each month and exceeded each month. We can't just sentimentalize this story and not think about what's happening today to people who are being told you don't have a place here. Mary and Joseph, who go to the inn and who are told, and this is the first verse I want to lift up, she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in a band of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. No place for them. Not just a physical place, they were told, but you're out of place somehow. Not our sort, dear. You're not welcome here as who you are. This is the situation in which the incarnation takes place. The Word is made flesh, and it's out of place. The Word is made flesh, and people don't know what to make of it. The Word is made flesh where it needs to be most. And in this case, it was through Mary and Joseph. But in our situation, it is any place where people are told they have no place or where they are out of place. I was so moved by the story of a couple in Utah who were determined to get married right now in this little window when their marriage might be legal or might be rendered illegal. They waited up all night. We're just waiting with bated breath, said Amy Wilson, 7 months pregnant, who spent much of the night outside the offices of the Salt Lake County Clerk. We're not missing this. Her daughter is due in February, and Miss Wilson said that a marriage license would mean she and her partner of 7 years, Emily, would both be recognized as the children's parents, each of their names listed on her birth certificate. Without the license, they've been exploring out-of-state adoption and other costly measures to ensure both women are legal guardians. After a cold night, she and Miss Wilson were legally married at 8:20 a.m. It was fast in a stairwell with Ms. Arazuma's brother performing the rites. It was fantastic, Miss Wilson said. I'm a little bit speechless. We are just ecstatic. They are not out of place. Their urgency tells us that nobody should ever be told that you are out of place or there's no place for you. The story of Reverend Frank Schaefer, who is the United Methodist minister, who has been, I hate this word, defrocked by, why do I hate it? It's just silly. I guess frocks are silly, aren't they? Yes. Okay. Usually I only wear them around the house, never in public. He's defrocked. He lost his ordination because he performed a marriage ceremony for his son and then said he would do it again and again and again. He has 3 gay children. 3 of his 4 children are gay. And the United Methodist Church said, we don't have a place for you or for your son or for anyone in your family. You have to leave now. And I love that a Methodist bishop in California has offered him a job. She doesn't have the power to restore his ordination, but she's going to put him in a church where he can still function. And she said this when she made this act, Bishop Carcano, I think it's time for some civil disobedience within our church. I think it's time for some civil disobedience in our church. She said, you know, if the Methodists think it's time, you know it's time. Frank Schaefer, by the way, Frank Schaefer is going to preach here in January or February. We've been in touch, so we'll get to hear him tell his story. Nobody is ever out of place. There was no place for them in the inn. We make a place. You know, I have to say, I had planned to say this anyway, but I heard a lovely children's voice chime in at the end of the anthem. And I want to say this. The crying children are not out of place in church, nor are crying adults. When a child makes noise in church, it may be because it's boring. I like to think not. It may be God wants to say to us, listen, you have a future. Don't whine about a crying baby. Listen, you can hear that you have a future. That's why God uses a baby to send a word of hope to us, so that we know we have a future. No one is ever out of place in the church, in spiritual community, in homes. And if they are, that's a sign that it needs to change. What's wrong is the person. It is not the homosexual which is perverse, but the society in which he is found. It was a German film from the early 1970s. And I loved its reversal that said, do not apply labels that say that people are out of place. Maybe society needs an adjustment, not individual people. And that's the message of that verse for us. No one is out of place. Mary and Joseph knew what it meant to be out of place. On Sunday at Congregación Latina's service at 1 o'clock, we ended the service with posadas. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this ceremony. Some of you may not be. But we reenacted Mary and Joseph going around knocking on doors, asking to gain entrance. So half the congregation went in the social hall, and the other half stayed out here. And we went to the doors, the closed doors, and banged on the doors, and we sang back and forth through the closed doors. Let us in. Let us in. Who are you? We don't know you. You're trouble. Let us in. And I really got caught up in it. I was thinking, what is this? It's a story about Mary and Joseph trying to claim their place, but is it gay people trying to gain entrance into the church? Is it undocumented people saying, let us in, we're already here? I couldn't separate out which story was taking place in that moment, and it was so sacred. It was not, it moved me more than anything we'd done in church that day. There's something about inclusion that is related to incarnation. And if we can get one or the other, we'll get both. In the second little section, we have angels and shepherds. Angels appearing to shepherds. That means almost nothing to us except insofar as we picture it on Christmas cards, perhaps. But it meant something in first century Palestine. Shepherds worked at night. They worked in the fields. They lived outdoors. They were considered sketchy by society. They were not allowed to participate in the religious rituals of Judaism at that time. They were considered unclean, and they could not be witnesses in court because they were considered undependable. They had a character attributed to them of dishonesty because of how they made their living. Who do the angels appear to? Priests in Jerusalem? Wealthy people? No, to these shepherds in a field. And they are so excited just by hearing this piece. If you go, you'll find a baby, not in a fancy cradle, but wrapped in swaddling clothes. That means it would be like saying newspaper strips today. That's the kind of image it's meant to communicate. God, in search of humanity, looks for who is not esteemed and reveals God's self to people that can't even be witnesses in court and says, look what you can see that nobody else can see. And look and see that I identify with you. I am with you. It's the ultimate act of solidarity seen in this second section. And in the final section of the gospel, I want to lift up just this one little verse. Well, picture the scene. The angels had left. Things were finally calming down around the stable. And shepherds appear at the door. Imagine Mary saying, Joseph, I think there are people at the door. Are they your friends? They're not mine. And he says, no, I don't hear anything. She says, no, yes, there are people at the door, and frankly, I've had a long night, so I need you to get up and look. And he looks and sees these shepherds who still haven't yet even seen the baby, and they're going around telling people about it. Because just a hint of liberation, just a hint of solidarity, just a hint of acceptance and inclusion is enough to convince us that we can proclaim it from the housetops, even if people aren't interested in hearing what we have to say. And here's the verse I lift up. Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. Mary, looking on this scene, shepherds, angels, she's just had a baby. Their insurance probably has not been worked out yet. And she sees not chaos, but beauty. How shall we love thee, holy hidden being, if we love not the world which thou hast made? Oh, give us deeper love for better seeing, thy word made flesh and in a manger laid. These are the words of Lawrence Hausman, and I am sure this is what Mary felt when she saw this chaos. And she put them, all these things, in her heart. And that's what I want to lift up to you as our final image tonight. The heart of Mary is a place where everyone is always welcome. The Cathedral of Hope is a heart of Mary. Individuals here have hearts like Mary. Anyone who understands that inclusion is incarnation has the heart of Mary. Tonight, I have good news of great joy for you. There is always a place for you. Amen.